Welcome to Embracing Holland. I'm one of your hosts, Meg Barrett.
And I'm your other host, Angie Aldridge. And we invite you to pull up a chair and listen in as we travel the road of raising children with disabilities.
Our hope is to share with you how ordinary people on this journey have unpacked their bags and faced adversity with creativity, passion, and determination.
Join us as we embrace Holland. Welcome, everyone. This episode's a little different than our usual interview style episodes. This is a travel tips episode. And it was actually birthed out of an episode we recorded with our guest today, Christy, who is going to introduce herself in a moment. But we had interviewed her and her whole story, and you're going to hear that later this summer. But what came out of it was a great discussion about traveling and all the different kind of tips and hacks and tools that we need to be able to travel as a family when we have family members with disabilities. So we invited Christy back. You're actually going to hear these two episodes out of order. So you're going to hear this one first. So Christy, will you please introduce yourself for our listeners?
Hello, my name's Christy Cargill, and I am mother of two daughters. My oldest is Emily, who is 16, and she is what I guess I would call my medically complex child, who also has additional special needs. And my younger daughter, Isabel, is 13, and we live in Minnesota with my husband and our dog, Tito. And I just wanted to share a little bit of travel tips with everybody. We really didn't start traveling until Emily was about 9. And I mentioned she's 16 because Emily had severe anxiety. And so every time we get in the car, she would cry and cry and cry. And quite honestly, I didn't know it was anxiety because I don't have it myself. So I didn't understand it. And being that she's not a child that verbally speaks and wasn't really able to communicate that to us, we had no idea. And after we figured that out, we ended up traveling for a study, the Tiger study for autism, and flew from Minnesota to Seattle, which is about like a 3.5-hour flight. We learned that by controlling Emily's anxiety, we were able to travel without her freaking out, which then opened up a whole new world because here we had this 9-year-old who doesn't fit in any of the infant changing stations or anything to that matter. And she does require medical cares that, quite honestly, I can't put my child on a bathroom floor. I mean, if I absolutely had to, I guess I would, and I would make sure it was as clean as possible by putting stuff down. However, I just couldn't bring myself to do that because people can still see your kid laying.
Oh, yeah. It's about dignity as well as cleanliness. Yeah.
Right. So I started kind of calling the airports, the Minneapolis airport and the Seattle airport, and they were very accommodating. They actually found private offices for us to do some cares with Emily and even brought in the mats that you have at the airport in the event that your plane gets delayed, like everybody on a plane is delayed for a long period of time. They bring out places for people to sleep overnight at the airport. They kind of set up things like that. And I was like, there's just got to be a better way to do this. So over the years, we've learned a few little tips and tricks that we have utilized when we travel. So first, maybe I'll just go through what we've done when we've flown, which I should say we've only really flown with Emily in her entire life. 4 times. So that Seattle trip was trip number 3. Trip number 4 was just most recently where we flew to Florida. And what I found is TSA, there is a website for TSA for anybody. And in that website, there's TSA Cares, which addresses people's questions related to medication and fluids and oxygen and what you can and cannot bring on the plane. And basically, if anything is deemed medically necessary, you can bring it on the plane. So we called TSA Cares and let them know what our flights were and said we were coming to the airport on these set days around these times. And they assigned an agent who met us at the front of the security line and basically walked us through the line, which was really nice. We were traveling during spring break, so that allowed us to skip in front of a whole bunch of people. Some airports also have a wheelchair line, which is usually fairly short. And that allows you to kind of go through faster. But what the TSA Cares did is I was able to tell them ahead of time, she's got liquid food that is in food pouches. It cannot be opened. Once you open it, we have no way to seal it back up and the food will spoil because it's actual real food. And so we were able to tell them, we don't want this opened. We're going to bring bringing bottles of medication. And we also brought all of her medication pre-drawn in syringes for 7 days, which was well over 300 syringes of stuff.
Whoa. That is startling to somebody to see that.
We had a whole carry-on suitcase that was full. And basically they just told me, you just have to have the medication labeled. And then anything that's over 3 ounces has to be clearly labeled of what it is, and they will open up anything over 3 ounces and check it. The process took us maybe 30 minutes to go through, so we planned ahead as far as giving us a cushion of time. But I highly recommend, if anybody is flying, whether your child uses a wheelchair or not, TSA Cares was originally designed to help people with, I think, autism. And it was a TSA agent that realized there was a need for a program like this. And they also, I think, have the same program where you can call ahead and have your child come out and visit the airport to get familiar with the airport before the actual flight day. So they were super helpful, and I would highly recommend using that. So anything that's under 3 ounces, they don't really bother with. And we were even able to bring bottles of water on the plane because they were medically necessary for her specific needs.
That's awesome.
So that is one of my little tips for trips. The other thing that I found is I've been scoping out bathrooms for a long time. And Angie, I know that you have done a lot of work on getting bathrooms accessible in the state of Maryland. I have not been as successful with that here in Minnesota. The legislators that I've talked to have just kind of pushed that on the side and said, until somebody else writes a bill and can kind of get it pushed through, Minnesota's not going to do anything like that. So I'm grateful for all of your work in Maryland, because hopefully that will kind of roll over to our state as well. But what I've noticed is when I travel, I always peek in bathrooms, specifically the family bathrooms and any of the lactation rooms. And so when we were flying from Minneapolis to Florida, we discovered a lactation room. And for whatever odd reason, it did not have a lock on it, which made me feel really uncomfortable. But it had a big reclining chair. So between my husband and I, and even Isabel, she just kind of blocked the door so nobody could come in. And we used that reclining chair to do her toileting needs of getting her all situated before we got on the airplane. So if you have the ability to find
that's a good idea.
A little gem like that in your airport, that it was nice to use as opposed to trying to bring her into the women's bathroom that, they do have longer counters. But again, then she's a 16-year-old exposed, and people aren't necessarily the nicest with their looks and even comments on stuff like that. But on our way home in Florida, I discovered I don't know how you say this.
I was wondering, I saw that link that you sent. Mamava? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a lactation, they're pods. And we noticed one when we first walked into the airport, and I was like, I wonder what that is. Well, apparently in order to get into it, you have to download the app, which fortunately we were able to do at the airport. So we downloaded the app, and then it tells you if the pod is occupied or not. And if it's unoccupied, you can get a key, basically a digital key, to type in and open the pod. And when we opened it up, it's not the most comfortable pod, but it had 2 benches, one on either side for a mother to sit on. And then it had a long kind of platform, almost like a countertop across. And so we just decided, well, we're going to lay Emily on top of there and do her cares again before we had to get on a 3.5-hour plane ride home. So I would recommend using those lactation pods. We did wait because somebody was going to use it, and she was offering it up to us first. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, you do your business. And then we'll do ours afterwards. But it was a pretty slick little
find.
I'm
looking at this website. I've never heard of this. And now I feel like I want to look and see if I can find any. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Neat. The other thing I would recommend with flying is we have a DME, so durable medical equipment provider, who provides Emily's supplies like her briefs and her chucks or underpads and her catheters and all of that stuff that kind of goes along with her medical needs. And I called them about a month in advance and asked them if they would be willing to ship her supplies to a specific location. We happened to rent a house when we were in Florida this time, as opposed to going to a hotel, just because of COVID. We wanted to be more secluded and not around other people. And so we were able to work with our DME and have them send her supplies. So we didn't have to worry about packing an entire suitcase full of just her stuff, like her briefs alone, as a 16-year-old.
Sure.
It just take up a lot of space. And so that was super slick. And as far as I understand whether you have the supplies shipped to your house or shipped to another location, insurance doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
They just pay for shipping. So we didn't have to pay anything additional
That's
for
great.
that. Yeah, we did bring an extra suitcase that we did check on the plane, but anything that is medically necessary, TSA allows you to bring on a plane. So Emily had a carry-on that was just her regular carry-on. And then she had a whole medical bag that the airlines did not count as an additional bag, which is pretty slick.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. And so that is my tip for flying, is to check in with TSA. Oh, we also called the airline about 2 weeks beforehand. Sometimes when you're buying airline tickets, you can check that you have needs, like you need a wheelchair or you have hearing needs or that you have a nut allergy and you want to let them know. We happen to fly Delta this time. I'm not necessarily promoting them, but that's who we flew with this time. And I just called them ahead of time and they were able to move our seats together because of Emily's needs. They also moved us more to the front of the plane, not necessarily an upgrade in seat, but as far forward as they could. And we also boarded like super early. And then even before they were boarding first class, they let us board this time, which was really nice.
That's great.
So with that, because Emily does use a wheelchair full time for her mobility, we had to rent a modified van. And normally we drive everywhere. Our road trips are always done in our vehicle because we know that we have to do most of her cares in the back seat of our van. Since there are no places to do a lot of those in public outside of your pediatric hospitals that specialize in kids with similar needs. So we were able to rent a van, which I found the state of Florida, the state of California, Washington, and Illinois seem to be states that you can easily locate a van that has been modified.
Yeah, and you had told us about this, and this is, I think, what spawned the whole travel thing, because you started talking about renting the van, and we were like, what?
Huh?
Yeah, and so they're not cheap. There's nothing inexpensive about them. It's like renting basically like a sports car while you're on vacation, although there's nothing fun and sporty about a modified van. However, it did allow us to make that trip down to Florida without having to do a 24-hour drive each direction. So there are quite a few places, especially in Florida, because Florida is like a very common location for people to have wishes granted. So there's a lot of modified vans that the different wish organizations use, specifically in the Orlando area. However, we happen to stay on the Sarasota area and they delivered it to the airport. So we got off the plane, got our luggage. They delivered the van and we drove it for a week and then we returned it and they took it back. And they had somebody else coming in to, as soon as they cleaned it and turned it over, rent it. So not all places, I guess, deliver to the airport. I don't know how people figure out how to get to the modified van place if it's not being delivered, but I thought that was a great option that it was available. And Emily in the state of Minnesota does qualify for waivered services that is in addition to her medical assistance. And we were able to write it into her waiver plan to utilize funds for transportation. Since we couldn't even rent a regular van, there's no way we could break down her wheelchair and she doesn't have a car seat to sit in and doesn't sit independently. So we were able to justify it with our county and state to allow those funds to be utilized. Now, I don't know what all programs there are out there. I do know there are some states that are similar to ours that have great waivered services, but just something to look into, that it's possible if you have some sort of funding available for your child, you might be able to justify it in the sense that your child wouldn't be able to go on a vacation with you or be in the community without the assistance of a modified vehicle.
No, that's fantastic.
So another tip, which probably, I mean, this might just be common sense to most people, but things that I don't always think about is, you know, when we travel, sometimes I mentioned that we would ship supplies ahead from our durable medical provider or equipment provider, but sometimes we've ordered on Amazon as well, like just Amazon Prime, and sent it someplace. Or this last time, because of COVID, it's super easy to pre-order groceries. Most places, you know, whether it's the big box stores like Target and Walmart or the local chains, almost every place that we were interested in had some sort of online ordering and pickup, which was super slick. Then we didn't have to worry about dragging Emily out of the van and into a store and around, which sometimes can be overwhelming for for her.
Well, you said it might be obvious, but like I do grocery pickup every week, but I don't know that I would have thought to do it ahead of time to the destination that I was going. That's
right.
really
I
smart.
I really didn't until I went on a girls trip last year, right before COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And there was 16 of us in a house, and one of the moms coordinated all of the food, and she ordered and had it delivered. So as soon as we arrived at our house, there it was sitting on the front porch for us to put away. And I was like, that's so slick.
No, that's so smart.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a little
No, that's a good tip.
extra
I
tip.
like it. Mm-hmm.
It's also possible that, like, when we went on Emily's Wish trip when she was 8, we were able to rent a shower chair because we were at our location for a week. And she's really hard to shower when not in some sort of modified shower chair. And so we were able to rent that through a local equipment place. And I just Googled to find out who was local to the area.
Mm-hmm.
And then called in and asked about renting equipment. And that was also delivered to our location that we were at.
Because I would think we're going to have to pack up half the house, right? To go somewhere. But I'm thinking like we have a trip coming up next weekend just to go 2 hours away. And I'm like, oh my goodness, all the things that I can call ahead to try to have there so that I don't have to schlep it, in the van with all my kids.
Right.
So that's brilliant. I like that.
When we do road trips, we do bring a lot. I feel like every single time we pull out of our driveway, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like we've literally brought the whole house with us.
Mm-hmm.
We even purchased a car topper for our van just because we have to have so much space for everything else. We have to bring a cooler for bringing, Emily's food and stuff that has to be refrigerated. So we like to pack things in little zip pouches that they're typically for like men's folded shirt or women's shirts. They have shoe ones, and I just bought them on Amazon. So I just buy ones that fit the supplies that we need for Emily's day and pack everything day by day. So we were just carrying one little container of stuff for her at a time instead of having to sift through the entire vehicle trying to find where all her stuff is. But my preferred way to travel would be road trip because I feel like you see so much more. But I did want to provide these little travel tips that we've come across with the flying.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, honestly, flying with even just my family is like terrifying. Like I don't want to do it. Something that I've seen a couple of parents do, and not that you have to do this, but it's kind of nice. They have made little gifts for all the other passengers on the plane, like almost like a gift bag, and like explaining their.
And you get a packet, and you get a packet.
Well, it provides. I've seen people put candy or like whatever, but just a little note that we're traveling with our family member who has this type of disorder, and they might be upset, they might cry, just to let you know, please be patient with us. And so I thought, oh, well, that's a lot of extra work, but I kind of appreciate, that.
How many people fit in a plane? How many baggies do we need?
Yeah. Well, and it's just education, so it just goes a long way to help with some patience on the plane. But yeah, I'm pretty terrified to fly with my 3.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings up a whole nother thing too of like getting on the plane. So like with Emily, she doesn't move independently at all. So we had to carry her, and she's 4'6". So she's not super big, but I'm only 5'2", so she's most of me.
Yeah, she's pretty big then.
Yeah. And so I carry her on the plane and kind of get her situated. Well, she's too big for a car seat, and she doesn't sit independently. So we're like, what the heck? How are we going to keep her, upright on the plane? And so one of my girlfriends let us borrow, and I'm sorry, I don't have the name of it in front of me right now. She provided us with an FAA approved seat. Specifically, it's for the plane. It slips over the top of the seat. And unfortunately, it kind of blocks the tray table of the person behind. We were fortunate to travel when they weren't selling the middle seat, so it really didn't make a difference. But I guess the person behind you, they can't open their tray table once this is on. So you kind of have to like make friends with the person behind you to make sure they're okay with having their tray table not being used. But it slides over, and it's not a 5-point harness, but it's very similar to that with how it kind of buckles, and it buckles right into the airline system. And it did require me writing a letter to the FAA to get approval. However, I now have approval for Emily's life. They just sent back approval and said, as long as she remains the same size, she has approval. You just carry this letter with you. And the airline didn't question it one bit. It did take about 6 weeks. So it was something you definitely have to plan in advance, but you just get approval to utilize this harnessing system, which then for the most part, help keep her upright. We still had to do a little bit of holding her just because she kind of scoots a lot. But we used that, I don't know, that sticky shelf paper underneath her bottom. And that helped keep her from sliding as much.
No, that's very good. And that makes me think of, this is great for like smaller kiddos. But when we flew Mark to California, we got, and maybe everyone knows like this exists, but it was like, ooh, like another awesome Amazon find. But you can take a larger kind of car seat and make it sort of like rolling luggage.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that was the best thing ever, because we had to like schlep his car seat. And I was thinking we're going to have to drag it through the airport. But no, you just attach, the brace and the wheels and there it goes. So that was very helpful. There were a lot of comments in the group with some really cool travel things. So I wanted to share those. A lot of things about autism traveling that I wanted to kind of in here. So one of our group members mentioned Autism on the Seas, which is a staffed cruise that assists with boarding, meals, pool time, and activities. And you can get a one-on-one for an additional $500 for a 7-day cruise.
Are they available to come home with us?
Can you just outside
that's
of that?
pretty reasonable for a one-on-one.
I've heard of that, and I feel like, going off the top of my head, so I could be incorrect, but I feel like it also applied to other needs. I feel like it was not like if you had a child that had needs and it's a cruise, correct?
Yeah, I just pulled it up and it says vacations for adults and families living with autism, Down syndrome, and other related disabilities.
Right. Yeah, I think it was more than just, so it's even a more broad spectrum.
Yeah, I had never heard of that. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, staff assisted cruise. There were some recommendations for noise canceling headphones for both parents and the children. Let's see. There was some other things listed on here talking about calling TSA, which you had mentioned. And then a lot of people commenting about prepping ahead of time, doing a lot of like social stories and talking about something that we do with our family, especially with Mark, is that we will scope out the location ahead of time online. And, most places you're going to go, they have pictures of everything. So the bathroom, the bedroom, everything like that. So I do a video social story set to music that he likes. So when we went and traveled, it was the first trip we ever took as a family, was last summer during COVID. We went to the Outer Banks, and it was supposed to be a 6.5 hour drive that turned into a 9-hour drive. So that was fun. So we finally get there. And because I had showed him the pictures of the beach and the house and all the rooms, and I showed him exactly what his room would look like, he ran into that house and went to each room and he said, beach house. And he was running. And so I think it was really helpful for all my kids, really, because even with Jillian, with her anxiety, I think it really helps to prep them ahead of time and tell them this is what it looks like. That's what we're doing with the house we're going to next weekend. She has pulled it up on her iPad and gone through the pictures of, exactly what all the rooms look like. So I think sometimes it's just a lot of pre-gaming.
Everybody likes to know what to expect. That's not such a foreign thing.
Yes.
I agree.
So Meg, do you have any? You always have interesting hacks for whenever you guys go places. I know that a big deal for you guys was to have a very specific, your van. Can't be another van.
Yeah. Well, I think had we not had to take the van that we could get at the very last minute, we probably could have found many vans that would have suited our needs, but certainly one where we can turn off the rear climate control is now something I have learned that I'll be looking for. I really like Christy's idea about sort of packing those little pouches as you would need them. I think that's brilliant. We do a similar thing where we use a lot of, when you get a set of luggage, how you get the 2 suitcases, but then you'll get an overnight bag and a duffel. You end up with all these little bags that are really kind of useless for adults traveling. Well, we pack a bunch of those little bags. Those are helpful to us. Grab the blue bag, grab the red bag, grab the black bag. I also am a huge proponent of social stories and hyping the expected situation as much as we can. I know our trip last weekend, when we went to my daughter's cheer competition, we had my son watching a lot of videos. Thankfully, there were a lot of videos of the boardwalk environment, so he would understand that there would be people, there would be noise, there would be flashing lights, and he sort of studies it like studying game footage or something. You know, he wants to take that all in. We have tried to do things like sending things ahead to places that we're going. And twice that we've tried it, twice it has failed for us personally. But I think that had to do a lot with the shipping conditions as they were, you know, when the postal service was really far behind. So I will certainly continue to try that. But it was, unfortunately, I thought that was a brilliant idea and then it failed. Wah, wah.
Oh,
but
well, maybe it'll be better now. I had heard at one point, and I will do my due diligence. I'll make sure this is in the show notes, but there are bathroom locator apps. So I think there is an app to help find accessible restrooms, but someone mentioned on the Facebook page about trying to find bathrooms that don't have the automatic flushers. For kiddos that are terrified or really noise sensitive. But I know that there are bathroom apps out there that people will rate the bathroom, like, you know, of how like good it is. And I feel like my husband could probably be a contributor to that because I feel like he knows where all the good bathrooms are.
And Isabel, Isabel doesn't like the auto flush either, or she won't use hand dryers.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even have, I mean, she has anxiety, but she doesn't have any other diagnoses that it's just the noise sensitivity. So she just does not like that. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah. So
as well.
Yeah. I'll find that app and I'll link all of that in there. So trying to think if I have any other, I think one thing I will say as far as traveling is to try it. I think we were so scared for so long that we wouldn't be able to do it and that it would be terrible. But you know what? You can always come home. I mean, maybe not like, you know, if you fly across the Atlantic or another country, but you know, if you're traveling domestically, I feel like, you know, you can usually have some type of bailout plan, but I have been pleasantly surprised traveling that it has gone a lot better than I anticipated. I just remember one more thing. So I was like, I do have things to share. Mark sleeps in an enclosed medical bed at our house. So when we travel, we bought a bed and it was called a nickel bed tent. But essentially, it's just you can put it over any twin size mattress, but it's like a tent that you just zip up and you can zip him in. So he stays in, he's comfortable, he's not able to get out because the zipper's on the outside. So for Mark, it's able to contain him at night and it makes him feel like closed in and cozy. And he loved it. He slept well the entire week we were at the beach. So we'll be doing that again. That awesome. Is also helpful.
Yeah, I just wanted to share for those that may not know about it, but if your child has a diagnosis of being disabled, and whether I believe that comes from like the state. So Emily has a certification of disability from our home state of Minnesota. And with that, I was able to get her a free national park pass.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was going to mention that. There's state passes too.
Right. So in our state, we are able to get at the state level a discounted state park pass for the year with the handicap placard that we have for her wheelchair. Our county level parks do not allow that. Okay. They don't provide a discount, I think, because they're not getting as much funding, but the state level does. So we do that every year. But one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of the state parks and specifically the national parks are really, really, really trying to be more ADA friendly. So there's more paved trails. There's more accessible bathrooms. There are even lodging that is specifically more accessible. That might be like a cabin that has a ramp out in front of it. One of the things that we found in, I think, Michigan was one of the state parks had a beach and they had free beach wheelchairs available.
Wow.
So I'm a big Googler or researcher on the internet. I'm constantly looking for wherever we're going, what can I do to make it friendly for our entire family so that we can all participate in activities together. And I just really love the beach wheelchair option. And so when we were in Florida, almost all of the beaches that we went to, I chose them specifically because they had beach chairs available.
No, that's a huge deal. That's the difference between being able to go on the beach and not. So,
right. Yeah. So that's my recommendation too, is just doing your research ahead of time of where you want to go. I don't think anything can be really out of reach if, like you said, you just give it a try. You can always bail. You can do it in little doses. And we started off small with our trips, but in the end, we've done a lot of huge road trips where we've done over 3,000 miles in one trip. And one of our trips was even driving all the way up to Canada and going through a couple provinces in Canada and over to Banff National Park.
Wow.
And then down through Glacier National and back home. That was probably one of my favorite trips.
That's awesome.
We've also found drive-through zoos. Those are super fun.
Yes. We have one kind of near here, right? Is it like an hour away? There's like a safari. There's like a drive-through. You stay in your car and then the animals come up to the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a monkey try to eat our wipers one time on a drive-through safari. I'm kind of, I'm thinking my kids would be traumatized by that. But again, we'll try something another time, I guess.
Right.
Well, something else I want to bring up again, because we mentioned this in our special needs parenting life hacks episode several episodes ago. But, applying for that parking, that accessible parking, handicap parking placard, especially for children with autism who are wanderers and elopers and who don't travel from point A to point B without an adult really chaperoning and supervising that process, you can qualify for accessible parking. And that can make a very big difference when you're looking at going anywhere from an amusement park to a zoo and you have a huge long walk. You might be able to park closer and then have less of a dangerous kind of traversing to get to where you need to go.
I totally agree with that. I know a lot of parents feel guilty about applying for those placards because they feel they're going to take spots away from other people. But one thing that I always say is our lives are never a comparison.
Right.
So what's hard for you is hard for you and your family. And parking closer is just one of the little perks. My only thing would be if you feel guilty about taking a spot, just make sure you don't take a van accessible spot if you don't absolutely need to. Like if there's other spots open, because a lot of people just don't know the difference. I see that a lot with the elderly who just kind of park where it says handicap because that makes absolute sense. But, then those of us that do have those side loading vans, we can't just park anywhere.
Right.
But I really think people really need to get past that feeling of guilt and get those placards. And,
with us, we have one and we only use it when it's absolutely necessary. Like if we are going to the grocery store or we're going to Target and it's handicap space and regular space next to each other, I'm not going to use it, but we went to a children's hospital and it was the difference between parking right near the door and parking way far on the other side of the deck. And knowing that it was an unfamiliar place that Mark would melt down, it was great to be able to park and then go right in. And then, we didn't have to worry about him, getting upset and trying to pull away from us and, making it hard. So I think, you can also be selective of what occasion do you use it, so.
Agreed.
Well, I can't think of anything else. How about you, Meg?
One thing I would add when you were talking about just try it, I think it is smart to start pushing your boundaries kind of slowly. So, maybe try something an hour away before you commit to something 10 hours away and, try to build from there, because it is really hard, especially if you're going to visit family or friends or something, you have other people expecting you. It's just harder to pull the plug when things go poorly, so sort of spread your wings gently would be, my thought.
Yeah. And, I think it's also helpful if you can just prepare everybody. Like sometimes we do a lot of prep with Jillian and some with Luke, it may not, we may have to make extra stops and we may, he might get upset if we're stopped in front of a train or something just a lot of prep ahead of time for everybody can kind of temper everyone's expectations for what's going to happen on a long road trip crammed together. So
I think that was probably one of my biggest things is I had to realize that I couldn't set those expectations anymore. My expectation is that we just do the best we can and have fun to the best that we can. I used to have these expectations that everybody's going to be happy, and they just weren't even realistic. Even for a family that doesn't have a child with any needs, they weren't realistic expectations. And then I would feel let down and then I'd get upset, which doesn't help any of the situation either. So I've kind of lowered my expectations on travel so that we just do it and experience whatever we are meant to experience on that trip.
Yep. And, it's kind of I think I set a really low bar for myself for like public speaking. As long as I don't lose any bodily fluids when I'm speaking, I feel like it went well. So I feel like the same could apply to traveling. If we don't have a loss of any bodily fluids that, are not supposed to be happening, then I count it a good day. So that's my low bar for travel. All right. Well, thank you, Christy, for once again gracing us with your time and all your tips and your knowledge and your resources for the families that listen.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. You can find us on social media and our website, embracingholland.com. You can also email us with your thoughts, questions, or ideas for future interviews at hello@embracingholland.com. We hope you join us next time as we embrace Holland.